Hello, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Firstly, again, did want to thank everyone that was able to come out and join us virtually here for the third of our webinar series, tracking down why recoveries fail. In this edition, we are going to be looking at the human errors, or even more specifically here, the types of employees from which we need data protection. Where can things go awry, open up our organizations to increase risk, and what tools does Unitrends equip our users with to overcome some of these errors and these challenges? We're absolutely going to take a deeper dive. Before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. My name is Adam Margette. I'm a technical specialist here with Unitrends, and I will be your host for today's presentation. Now, when everyone joined the WebEx meeting, or the WebEx event here, all attendees were placed onto listen-only mode. So if you're trying to chat with us, ask us questions, we cannot hear you, so please use the chat or the Q&A functionality within the WebEx console. Submit any comments or questions as they occur to you. We do have some time reserved at the end of today's presentation to address any Q&A that comes in. Also, this session is being recorded, and a link to playback will be made available to all attendees roughly 24 hours following the conclusion of the presentation. And I think most importantly, or potentially most exciting, is that this is one of our $500 tech demos. So with that being said, 5 of our lucky attendees here today have been entered into a random drawing to win one each of 5 $100 Amazon e-card prizes. So keep an eye out on your email. Over the next couple of days, we'll be getting those cards sent out digitally to our 5 winners. Lastly, I would encourage everyone out there, if you're not already, to give us a follow on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Social media is a great place to keep up with all of the latest and greatest news, announcements, updates, product releases, promotions, giveaways, and more coming from Unitrends to our community. And now here, without any further ado, I'm just going to go right in and get started. If you'll indulge me for a moment, I just want to take time to introduce the company for anyone that might be joining us for the first time, or anyone that's not as familiar with Unitrends. We are a data backup and disaster recovery solutions provider, and we've been in this space for a while. Originally founded in 1989, protecting Unix systems. So a little trivia for you: the Uni in Unitrends is due to our founder starting his work with Unix systems in the late 80s. But now, 3 decades later, his initial work has evolved into what is Unitrends today, and over 30,000 customers now trust their data protection and disaster recovery needs to Unitrends. With a combination of our hardware and software solutions, we're protecting 2 exabytes of customer data on premises, and with the Unitrends Cloud, a purpose-built manufacturer's operated solution. The locations of our data centers, you can see roughly there, pinpoints on the map there. We're managing and protecting over 100 petabytes of customer data in that cloud environment. And it's a solution that's built to scale. A lot of times when folks ask me, hey, what's the best fit for Unitrends? And I would say, really, anyone that has data that needs protecting. We have customers that are protecting as few as a couple hundred gigs of data with their Unitrends solution, to customers that are managing tens, if not 50 plus appliances, protecting multiple petabytes of data. So it really has been a solution that's been able to scale and meet the needs of a lot of different organizations, regardless of size, data set, or industry vertical. Really backing and supporting everything that we do as our customer support organization. They're based right here in the U.S., actually co-load with our product development teams for truly unified experience, and they are really the heartbeat of everything that we do here at Unitrends. We place a tremendous amount of investment, visibility, and pride in that support organization. You can see just a little acknowledgement of all of that hard work. A couple of this year's Stevie Awards, we've won these year over year, attributed really to our customer support and our customer service organization. They do an absolutely fantastic job supporting our 30,000 plus users. They are entirely US based, as I had mentioned, and they're available to our community 24/7 by 365, whether that's by phone, chat, web support. You can even open up a VPN tunnel right from your Unitrends appliance to our support folks in Columbia, South Carolina. So again, just want to take a moment to acknowledge them. They do an absolutely fantastic job here. But when we look at some of the challenges, I think that overall, us as IT professionals are really facing a less is more world. We've seen an increased demand of availability from the business units that we provide, and it's left us with very, very little margin for error. But while we're being tasked or asked to provide incredibly high levels of availability, in a lot of cases, we're facing more work, risk, and projects than ever before, but being provided, on the other hand, with less resources, whether that's manpower or budget, with which to accomplish things. A lot of folks that I talk to and that we talk to are really being driven by their leadership to invest in application availability or increase end user experience, and at times is at the expense of production infrastructure or maintaining some of that hardware in the data center that's required to deliver some of these services. Ultimately, we've seen an increase. There was a study by Cloud Endure. They're an AWS service partner, and they do an annual state of the cloud and data protection survey. What they had found is that the organizations that are striving to meet 5 nines of availability, it's so tight we don't even have it on this chart here, but the organizations overall that are striving to meet that 5 nines of availability has increased 33% over the last 3 years. So as I had mentioned, we're seeing a tightening in the demands of us as IT professionals. And when we think about the value that we're placing on our data today, the importance of the data and how it's really the lifeblood of the business, probably the second most important component behind the people that are driving the organization forward. And data is incredibly important and incredibly valuable. We're increasingly monetizing it to drive advancements, market segmentation, respond proactively to existing customers, and so forth. So when you see that average cost of downtime is about $9,000 per minute, it's taking into account more than just the organization's ability to transact. Obviously, if systems are down, we can't drive revenue, but we also have the impacts of employee productivity. If they're not able to access the machines or the workloads, the applications that they require to accomplish their day-to-day tasks, depending on what that outage looks like, we have potential costs for recovery. Something like a fire, a flood, a ransomware attack represents a significantly higher cost to recover than a user that accidentally deleted a file or a presentation for the board. Fairly easy if those are backed up to be able to put those back. So you may feel that $9,000 sounds high for your organization. It might sound a little bit low for others, but I think that it's really critical to assess, what are we being asked of the business units that we serve? What's realistic to deliver? How do we prioritize these workloads and maintain that productivity? When you think about the spectrum of events that can happen, in a lot of cases, the headline-grabbing events, hurricane, fire, ransomware, while they represent some of the more severe downtime events that we're responding to, they're far from the most common. We usually see, or much more commonly, I should say, see things like innocuous human error, software compatibility issues back end in the server room, might be with the network, that are taking down systems or disrupting our day-to-day operations. But we recognize that no 2 downtime events look the same, and we're really working on that spectrum. Here at Unitrends, it's our goal to enable our customers or our users to respond with agility to any sort of downtime event, whether they need to recover granular items, just restore individual files and folders, recover full guests or applications, or even have means to recover their entire site. We're going to take a look at what some of those look like with Unitrends, but we aim to strive, or we're striving to provide our customers with an all-in-one experience for their local backup, long-term retention, off-site recovery, even offering a white glove disaster recovery as a service here. So let's kind of dive right in and explore the 5 employees from which you need data protection. And the first of these are those that are installing or leveraging untested software. We had, and I'll put this link in the chat for folks a little bit later on, kind of a disaster recovery failures hidden risk checklist. And a lot of these requirements here are software issues. Are we restoring a system that was backed up with UEFI to a BIOS-based physical server? If there are multiple dependencies, are the machines in which we're restoring being brought up gracefully in the correct boot order? Do they have the right networking configurations to be able to communicate with one another? It can be very, very difficult to test, and a lot of organizations that we talk to are unable to test as frequently as they know that they should or as frequently as they would like to be because of some of those limitations we talked about earlier, whether it's time, budget, or even manpower in some cases. Where Unitrends can help is with our data copy access. Data copy access is a function that enables our users to configure recovery tests right from the most recent backups that have been taken. So you're able to leverage that existing data to go in and certify applications, simulate the boot order and the failover of machines. Rather than talking about it, I would love to show everyone what this looks like. So when you come into our appliance here, you're going to have an HTML-based dashboard for everything Unitrends. You'll rack and stack your physical appliance, plug it in and give it an IP address, or you can install our virtual appliance or on top of your favorite hypervisor, VMware Hyper-V, Zen Hypervisor, and Nutanix AHV. We can all install on. Once the appliance has its IP, you'll use that to access our web UI from any Chrome or Firefox browser. Now, we have a tile-based dashboard here, so it's fully customizable to your view. You can drag and drop tiles around, add additional tiles in, or scale them back with this little gear icon in the top right here. Really put the most important information for you and your staff front and center here. Over on the left, you've got key tabs for functionality within the backup environment: protect, recover, scheduling out our jobs, our backups, our replication, our data copy access, some great enterprise reporting functionality. Great thing about our reporting and a lot of what you're looking at here is it's all pre-tuned and pre-configured. There's no need to stand up a proxy server with Unitrends. You don't have to bring your own SQL database to run reports and get graphs, things like that. It's all preloaded and ready to go out of the box. We're striving to deliver simplicity in a lot of cases for our customers, and one place you see that is in the reporting. Appliance configuration is where you'll add in the clients and the assets that you want to protect, manage that local appliance, retention. We're going to take a look and configure in a little bit. I know that we're making a lot of assumptions here, but kind of bear with me. In the top right are our system-wide alerts. These alerts can be configured to be emailed out to the administrators of your choosing. You can capture SMTP traps, You can get trap notifications. That's a mouthful. You can get trap notifications from these alerts here. It's anything immediately that would require your attention. So one of the first places you'd want to look when you come into your Unitrends environment. You'll also have access to our support folks. Right from the appliance, access our online help and chat, our community forums and knowledge base library, as well as being able to open up a support tunnel right from your appliance to our support center in Columbia, South Carolina. Have one of our support engineers log in, review logs, error messages with you, make any fixes to remediate any speed bumps that have gone along the way. So when you come into let's come into configure first. We're making a lot of assumptions here. When you're looking to add in clients that you want to protect, you'll come first to configure and then over here to protected assets. And an asset is any physical server, virtual machine, NAS device, or application that you want to protect with Unitrends. You can see that we've got a number of assets that are registered to our environment, their IP address, the description here of what it is that we're backing up, virtual host level backups, essentially snapshots of our virtual guests, Windows clients that we've pushed our agent out to. When you're adding in an asset, you'll come to the drop down here and select either an asset, a virtual host, NAS device, whatever it is that you're looking to register to your backup system. Adding in a virtual host, for example, you'll determine or select the hypervisor type, your primary source appliance, the IP address of that host, and the admin credentials. We'll log in and communicate directly with the APIs of those hypervisors to grab the data and the snapshots that we need to create the backups. When you're adding in, say, a physical host, for example, very similar, just the name of that asset, its IP. You can push install our Windows agent here, our file level agent credentials here so that we can access that machine. You can also, from the configuration tab, add in those assets, manage retention settings. We're going to take a look at retention a little bit later on here. We'll add in your host. All of the guests are auto-discovered, added in our physical servers down here. Once you've registered those assets to the system, you're ready to start taking backups. You will schedule out the creation of your backup jobs from using the Create Job drop-down here to schedule out a backup job, or even create an SLA policy where you can group machines by their RPO, or the frequency in which we need to back them up. In that single operational step in creating the SLA policy, you can also automatically have backup copies of the machines you've enrolled created and replicated off-site to another Unitrends appliance at a warm site or a hot recovery site, archive those off to removable media, another storage device, just making sure that we're getting copies of that data off-site. So once the backups have been scheduled, they've been taken, and you're ready to start testing, you'll come in and create that data copy access job. Unitrends, as I had mentioned, offers a disaster recovery as a service offering. It's a white glove spin-up or failover process in which we'll host mission-critical machines or, in some cases, customers' entire data centers in our cloud environment in the event of a local outage. We've been performing application-level recovery testing in our DR environment or our cloud environment for the last 6+ years. But what I love about data copy access and ultimately the outcomes of recovery assurance, that testing that I'm about to show you here, is that it was really driven from our community. Our DR customers were enrolled in the service. They were getting back the reports, both compliance and the status of the application performance regularly. They said, Unitrends, this is great. And it's a testing process that in an automated fashion we've never seen before. It's either something that we have to manually script, or we're relying on screenshot verification and kind of crossing our fingers that the underlying data is intact, the services are running, the applications are going to be able to respond, but we don't really know until we're able to test it. Here at Unitrends, again, we're delivering that automation. So when we come in, we'll tab down from our backups, and we've got a number of machines that we can test up top here. We have selected that we're going to test some of our VMware guests, and there are a couple of machines that we're going to enroll in our test here. We have a SQL server, a web server, and our Active Directory. Stop me if you see it. Here we go. So we've got 3 machines with some dependencies here. Both require AD to authenticate and authorize. The SQL database here backends into the web server. So we've got some dependencies here, multiple machines that are responsible and need to be orchestrated as they're spun up. When you're configuring the data copy access job, you will build out a lab profile as a target for testing. When you add in the profile, you'll give it a custom name up at the top here. You can customize this based on the compliance settings, location, so forth here. You'll determine the target host for our testing, resource pools where configured, the data store that we'll be leveraging, recovery and test networks. These are key because not only can you use data copy access to run this automated testing, you can also use it to spin up an isolated sandboxed environment to run patch testing, DevOps, QA, or to use it for push-button failover in which you'd recover the machines as specified and as configured on the target host, guarding against some of that local failure or those local outages. So recovery is going to be live to our VM network testing. We did configure an isolated sandboxed environment, which has no connection to our production network. So our testing will be confined within the sandbox. We'll be leveraging our ETH0 appliance, and you'll also, configuring this job, determine the recovery point and the recovery time objective in intervals of hours or minutes here. So you can track compliance here as well. Once the profile has been configured, we've got a number here. You can select them from the dropdown. Once configured, they'll be available here in your lab profile dropdown. You select the profile and the target for setting. You can review the location, the RPO, and the RTO that you set for these particular tests. Go over to next to create the schedule. You're going to look and feel throughout our entire appliance, just determining the days of the week in which you want this job to run, or the start time, toggle on the days of the week in which you want the job to run, select its start time and its recurrence, up that recurrence where more frequency or granularity may be required. So once our schedule has been set, the profile has been defined, lastly, we will come in and configure the specific tests against our applications. And again, this is where we're taking you beyond screenshot verification. I have a colleague that affectionately refers to screenshot verification as Schrodinger's backup. They've brought you to the login screen, but they haven't certified any of that underlying data. We don't know that it's going to work. We've had customers come over to Unitrends from vendors where they had been leveraging screenshot verification, and the horror stories when it comes to failed recoveries there. Underlying databases were corrupt or not intact, or log files were empty. Screenshot verification is not going to tell you that. We had one client that recovered from a backup only to find ransomware once they logged in. Some really scary stuff, and it leaves folks in a lot of cases in the dark. With Unitrends recovery testing, recovery assurance here, you're able to simulate what that failover process is going to look like. You can define things like the boot order of the machines, reconfigure their CPU and memory, adjust location, re-IP the machines. You can also set tests against the applications or the services to certify the underlying data here. So for our Active Directory machine, we're going to schedule out a test. Now you can run your own custom scripting through PowerShell, scan drives and folder for signs of malware or infection with our Clam AV antivirus. We've got over 50 tests as well that have been pre-scripted and configured here for you. In the case of Active Directory, we're going to test our domain service, execute scripts against our NTDS database to ensure that we're able to authenticate and authorize our users. So we'll add in Active Directory. We did leave it in our first boot group, and we've configured our test here. Secondly, we're going to bring up that SQL machine, put it on our group boot of second, and we'll be coming over to configure a couple of tests for SQL. In the first case here, you can run queries with an expected output, check the status of an instance. In this case, we want to check the status of our WebDB service. So we'll come in here, and we're also going to add a test, and we're going to test one of our Windows services, make sure that the database engine, our MS SQL server, is running. So we're checking and certifying the instance, checking the database engine. We'll click Save, and that's been configured here. See that in our second boot group. Lastly, we'll configure the web server. Come over to boot group of 3. We're going to confirm our changes. We'll schedule a couple of tests for web. Firstly, we're going to test IIS, make sure that we can publish and post the website. And secondly, we're going to come in and run a ping test and make sure that it can communicate with its SQL host here that it's reliant on here, get in touch with that particular instance. So we've configured a number of tests here, simulated the boot order. Again, you can re-IP these machines, reconfigure the CPU and the memory of these machines, really orchestrating or simulating that failover. Do you see how straightforward this is, but yet how it's so much different than that screenshot verification? Again, when you're not able to test, you don't know. So a clean, tested backup is really the best way to have that proof and confidence in your ability to recover. Once the testing has been configured, you'd click Save. We do have our data copy access job here within our Jobs Manager. And as I had mentioned, you can run on demand the testing as configured, spin up an isolated lab environment on the target location with those machines as configured, again, for patch testing, QA, DevOps, or even failover to the target host as specified, and we'll bring those machines online as orchestrated. Some great functionality with that data copy access. You see the results of data copy access right here on your dashboard. I love to keep this recovery assurance tile kind of front and center. It lets me know that from our most recent backups, we have been successful in meeting our RPO and RTO tests. We've had some successful tests as far as applications, but we've also had some failures here as well, so we can proactively identify where there may be issues with restore. Let's take a closer look at a couple of these reports here. The compliance report is benchmarking those RPOs and those RTOs. You can easily export this report into a PDF or a CSV file, hand this to a manager, director, compliance officer, and so forth. When we open up our details here, we can see that against our profile settings, we're well within compliance with an RTO actual of anywhere from 5 to 9 minutes and an RPO actual anywhere from about 7.5 to 9.5 hours ago. So we are compliant here with these backups. The output of the application tests you'll see from the recovery assurance tile. And I'm just going to go back to the start of the week here to grab a few more examples because we do have some failures going on. You can see that it's a live environment. It's not always green check marks here. I'll show you a successful test and a failed test as well here. So when you come in, we're going to leverage our instant recovery process, leveraging the appliance temporarily as our data store to meet that near zero RTO, really bring virtual machines up much more quickly because we mount a share to our appliance and inject the backup data directly into the disk. Here are our 3 machines, Web, SQL, and AD. We've reconfigured them as specified. We power them on. First in our boot group is Active Directory, domain service, on running, the instance is intact, and lastly for our boot group of web here, it's able to communicate with its backend SQL and IIS is running. Hey, we're going to be able to publish and post that website. Once we've executed through the application tests, we power off the VMs, tear them down, halt the instant recovery process, and update these reports here, both compliance and recovery assurance. This one here as well is easily exportable into a PDF or a CSV. When you're getting failed tests here, you're going to see kind of lit up red here and an error message here kind of providing a best guess or a description of what has happened. In this case, we had an operation timeout. We weren't able to tear down instant recovery. This resulted in a string of failed tests because you cannot have concurrent instant recovery sessions running for the same VMs. So we had a couple of failed tests, but if a query was not producing expected output, there was an issue with hypervisor licensing on the virtual host, you didn't have VMware tools installed, you didn't have storage vMotion available, so we couldn't move the location of the virtual disk, you'd be notified of those failures proactively here. So you can identify issues to recovery, make steps, and remediate any problems that have occurred. And again, our support folks are just a click or a phone call away. So recovery assurance, again, absolutely love this. It's one of my favorite features, and for a lot of our customers that are coming over to Unitrends, it's one of the features for them as well that they were the most excited about. So we had mentioned, again, we can identify compliance settings, the results of the application tests here again where we had issues with one of our VMs here. VM tools were not installed, weren't able to spin up that machine. We also, as I had mentioned, have security integrated in the data copy access job. You can scan with our ClamAV antivirus for threats prior to spinning up testing or dev environments or even performing that failover into the production environment. Excuse me. The second type of employee or employees that could impact our ability to recover are those more malicious. And when I was working with our senior product marketing manager, Dick Sappler, on putting together this presentation, he spent a long time as an analyst with the Aberdeen Group. And it said that this one was really challenging because it's one that there's not a lot of statistics out that folks are really going to admit, hey, we made a bad hire, or we made an oversight with an individual, or, we had a really ugly offboarding or something like that. But we certainly see it happen. In some cases, it's anecdotal. In some cases, it's more word of mouth. But we want to give you full control of the backup environment so that you have secure copies of the data that are immutable and everyone has access. With that, we've enabled role-based access control. So you've got the ability to set different permissions and the scope for particular users into the system, only give them the ability to perform restores on certain systems, they give them the ability to only schedule backups. You can really customize that to best fit kind of your view. You'll do that through the configuration piece here. When you come into the appliance, we're looking at our source appliance here. You can come in and edit. You can set, again, those email reportings, capture traps through the SMTP server here. When it comes to users, you can add in different users through their username, password, adjust their role here, just the ability to monitor, not initiate anything, manage, administrator, and super user here. You can set different access levels, backup operator, recovery operator, and say, hey, our database admin will give him the ability to perform recoveries, and we're only going to allow him to come in, excuse me, where did it go? See all my drop-downs, and we're only going to give them the access to be able to handle a couple of different databases here. So you can adjust that access and even script down and say, hey, you can only recover files, you can only recover to the same host here. A lot of customization here so that you can control who has access to doing what within the Unitrends system. That role-based access control, great for kind of limiting the scope and making sure that folks have the right visibility and control, but not too much control in some cases here. You also want to limit the damage from file deletion. An employee, kind of holding a grudge here, was terminated or let go or cut off in a layoff, and they're kind of going scorched earth on the organization. This doesn't necessarily have to be an IT professional either, but we want to make sure that we're limiting that damage from deletion. It's incredibly important to get a copy of data off-site. Very, very straightforward to configure that. You come in through your jobs tab here and can create a backup copy job to schedule out that replication. And Unitrends can replicate to a number of different targets. We can support replication to disk, tape, another storage device, whether that's an NAS device through CIS or NFS, fiber channel through, SAN through fiber channel or iSCSI. You can archive into public cloud environments. You can leverage the Unitrends cloud as well, where you've got a purpose-built environment for the long-term retention of your data. The great thing about the Unitrends cloud specifically is that it's licensed out granularly. So you're licensing the Unitrends cloud in 500 gigabyte increments, and you'll determine the retention period, 90 days, 1 to 7 years, or infinite retention. But from your local UI, from your Recover tab here, you can view all of the recovery points that you have on the cloud interface. So what we're looking at here is our backup catalog. And when we drop down here, we'll see the recovery points that we have available. We can adjust our filter over on the right here to view more backups on our appliance. This green text here indicates that the backup has been tested and certified by Recovery Assurance. If you recall, this SQL machine was a part of that testing. So this green indicates that it has been tested. We have a number of others here that have also been tested. Blacked out, or kind of the standard text here, indicates that we have a backup. It hasn't been tested. But over on the right in our filter, you can filter for any backup copies that are on the hot target. And a hot target is either another Unitrends appliance, hardware, software, or the Unitrends cloud. You can filter to view all of your recovery points, and you'll see here they've got this little cloud icon. I'll zoom in here for you. They've got this little cloud icon, and the text is turned purple. This indicates that they are residing hot on the target. Now, with these cloud-based backups, you can immediately create a file recovery object, create a share in the cloud stack, and download back individual files and folders. You can also import the entire backup and its string of dependents back to your source appliance to initiate full recovery of a system. There's no additional fees for egress. You've got access right through your local UI. Really nice cloud environment for a lot of customers, and in some cases they chose the Unitrends cloud over other options because of that predictable year-over-year pricing model, just capacity and retention. We're managing that back-end storage environment for them, and they've got full access to the backup copies that are being stored there with no fees for egress when they're looking to make retrievals. So when we look at where the Unitrends fits, as I had mentioned, you're going to deploy either our purpose-built capacity-based appliance. This is your backup software, as well as compute memory and storage resources to orchestrate your local backup and recovery processes. If you're looking to leverage existing compute and storage within your environment, you install our virtual appliance, or can install our virtual appliance on top of a hypervisor. From there, we'll register in and protect assets in your environment, physical clients, virtual machines, NAS devices, applications specifically. We support over 250 applications, operating systems, and hypervisors. When it comes to getting that data off-site, as I had mentioned, you can replicate to that cold backup copy or your archive target, another storage device, removable media, the public cloud, or replicate to another Unitrends appliance and standing up that recovery site, either with another Unitrends appliance or with the Unitrends cloud, in which you'd be leveraging our no-touch failover, that disaster recovery as a service, to recover within the Unitrends cloud environment. Just a little call out here, do not forget your SaaS applications. Your SaaS providers operate on what they call the shared model of responsibility, where Microsoft will guarantee certain levels of redundancy, fault tolerance, availability, guard you against kind of data center level events, but the users, the administration of the applications, and especially the data is still the responsibility and the intellectual property of the individuals that are subscribed to the service. Legal hold is not an effective backup tool. The recycle bin certainly is not an effective backup tool. In some cases, you're going to want to find a solution to fill in some of those gaps around retention and recoverability within SaaS environments. We do offer spanning. It's a cloud-to-cloud backup service for Office 365, the G Suite, and Salesforce.com. It's going to fill in some of those gaps in public cloud environments. You're running or can run backups, have them be automated to run daily or run them on demand. You're getting infinite retention of the backups that are being created, and they're being stored in a cloud location. We're not pulling backups down on-premise and storing them on an archive, or they're landing in a cloud location. You get infinite retention, but the pricing model is a per-user, per-month subscription. So as you continue to accumulate storage with that infinite retention, your cost doesn't change. It's just based on the user count of the SaaS app that you are protecting. Great for granular item restores. You can do cross-user restores, create new sites and land backups within new sites or folders, so you've got non-destructive restores. We're not going to overwrite any of the original files or any existing data when we're performing restores. A really nice little tool and incredibly straightforward and simple to use. It's a nice, clean interface. It demos in about 10 minutes. There's not a ton of complexity, just some great functionality to augment those capabilities of the SaaS applications. Our third employee that we should be worried or certainly cognizant of are those that fall prey to ransomware clickbait. And I'm sure that ransomware is not a new topic for a lot of folks, but it is a significant concern for a lot of the folks that we talk to here. Increasingly, they're using social engineering to drive attacks, coming in dormant to the network, observing behavior, how folks are talking to each other, capturing signatures, and so forth. And they start to emulate that sort of style of writing or that tone in an attempt to get folks to click on links that will then execute or will allow the hackers a way to get their binary into the production environment. Riviera Beach down in Florida was attacked earlier this year, and it was an administrator in their police department that unknowingly clicked on a bad attachment or a bad link. From there, they got inside the police department, made their way by stealing and collecting common credentials to the township's environment, ultimately brought both the PD and the town itself completely offline. They were working through to try and remediate the infection and the issue. Once the ransom had been demanded, they advanced almost $1 million from their upcoming fiscal year into the current fiscal year, spent about 3 weeks working with vendors, experts, and consultants to try and clean the infection off their network. They were unsuccessful in doing so, and after a little over a month, were finally brought to their knees and paid a ransom of 42 Bitcoin, $600,000 US. We're seeing these attacks get increasingly sophisticated, and with the proliferation of ransomware as a service, where threat actors can come in and buy code and just split a small percentage of the process for the ransomware kit, it's becoming increasingly difficult to track. Sophos estimates that every 11 seconds within the next couple of years, a new organization will fall victim to a ransomware attack. The really scary one for me is that 75% of companies that are infected were running up-to-date endpoint protection. Your layers of your protection strategies go far beyond your traditional AV and firewalls. In a lot of cases, it's that user education and that phishing awareness that folks are investing in. But you also want to invest in a secure disaster recovery strategy. When ransomware was first really starting to make waves and impact a lot of organizations, I'm thinking back in late 2016, the FBI released a press release, and one of the things that they recommended was certainly do not pay the ransom. We recognize that's not always a realistic option to not pay, but their thought is we don't want to further encourage these threat actors. Additionally, they said getting a secure backup off-site is the surefire or the surest fire way to be able to recover. We've seen, again, a number of different diverse attacks. They're getting increasingly sophisticated. This GAN crab here, you're getting regular updates from support and developers, and you can get a GAN crab kit for a 70-30 split. So you keep 70% of all of the profits that you make infecting and demanding ransoms. You share 30% with the developers, and they receive or provide you with regular updates and support. These are sophisticated criminal organizations that, in a lot of cases, we are dealing with. We've also seen a lot of these strains attempt to delete backups, disable antivirus. We worked with a customer at a large casino in the Southwest, and they were hit with a ransomware attack. They weren't leveraging cloud. They were replicating site to site, and they drove up to the secondary site only to find that their Windows-based solution at that location had received infected data from the primary site. That binary had executed on their storage repository and entirely wiped out the backups that they had stored off-site. At Unitrends, we take a little bit of a different stance here. In addition from being able to protect on the front end with your traditional AV and cybersecurity and the ability to recover, we're augmenting this process and your ability to fight back. The majority of binary that's out there is targeting Windows-based systems. That's your largest addressable install OS market. And so it's not to say that we haven't seen strains that are going after Mac or Linux, but they're significantly fewer and further between. Primarily, they're looking to go after Windows. Unitrends, from a prevention standpoint, is built on, our appliances are built on a hardened Linux kernel, a CentOS kernel. And Linux is a little bit more flexible in how you can architect and build those storage partitions. So in architecting out the storage partitions for our backups, we have built a secure read-only repository. It is immutable. So the appliance is the only machine that's going to be reading into those files. And even if we did back up Windows binary, it's not going to execute against Linux-based file extensions in that partition. In effect, it's not going to be able to see them. That's not to say that we've never created a bad backup, but in our 30 years, we have never had an appliance compromised or brought down by a malware or a ransomware attack. On the front end, we have a machine learning algorithm that will alert you proactively to anomalous changes in your environment. As the appliance is backing up the clients in your network, it will pick up and start to establish baseline patterns of behavior, things like rates of change, the Shannon entropy, the randomness overall of the data. A lot of times when this encryption is firing off, the data is getting scrambled. Not only are our change rates ballooning, but we're seeing large influxes of randomized data. We're looking at things like the density of the files, the levels of encryption here. When threat conditions are detected, it triggers an alert through our dashboard, those email configurations, trap notifications, identifying the point in time, the potentially infected system or the system that's behaving anomalously, and the source of that alert. Was it from a backup job, a data copy access test? Was it, hey, we were replicating, creating a backup copy? We'll let you know kind of where we first saw this alert and provide you with updates where we've noticed the baseline patterns being broken. If you've got the ability now to investigate, you go in, you're reviewing logs, you determine that, hey, the machine is infected, we quarantine it, we wipe it. You then use a recovery assurance tested, a good, clean backup to identify a clean point of restore to restore those systems online. One of our customers that's been able to leverage this to get out of a very, very sticky situation is Exco Engineering. They're based up in Toronto, just outside of Toronto, Canada. They are publicly traded. They're a machine and die-cast manufacturer for metal parts and metal tooling used in the automotive industry. Key to their operations on the manufacturing floor were Exchange, SQL, and especially that main file server. Before leveraging Unitrends, they were rotating LTO tapes off-site. They weren't able to test, and that file server had a little over 2 million unique files. A full backup was taking something like 3 days to complete and be written to those tapes, so they were looking for a faster, more efficient way to do things. They opted to deploy one of our appliances. They ditched the tape library and started to rotate in removable hard drives to get a copy of the data off-site and air-gapped, but also replicated to the Unitrends cloud, where they enrolled some mission-critical machines in our disaster recovery as a service. About 6 months after they deployed Unitrends, that file server was hit with a crypto virus. They were alerted to the anomalous changes. They were able to restore over those 2 million files, a little over 3 terabytes, to that server within 18 hours following the ransomware attack. Their IT director, Erica Reyes, had told us, hey, we'd be lucky if we'd been able to restore that device or that server from our tape backups within days. Unitrends had me back up in less than a day. Incredibly critical for these folks as a manufacturing plant. By the time parts are hitting the manufacturing floor, those orders are already in and paid for. So every second that they are down, they're falling behind and hemorrhaging money. Really help them get out of a sticky situation. That case study is available on unitrends.com, so you can check out Exco Engineering on our website if you'd like to read a little bit more about that. Data hoarders is another challenge. We've seen an exponential growth of data that we have to manage and protect. And I was at an event last night with a gentleman that works at a law firm, and he said, well, these lawyers, they want to keep everything. They think everything is important, and certainly some things are. What you're looking at here are results from the Unitrends Cloud and State of Data Protection Survey. It's an annual survey that's run by our product marketing folks. And we're not just collecting responses from Unitrends users. So this represents a broader overall community, folks that have engaged with us in Spiceworks, folks that are responding but maybe not using Unitrends today. But what we've observed is that steadily the increase of data in which organizations have to protect. And the sample size here, we're looking at roughly 800 respondents across a mix of industry verticals and organization sizes. So a pretty representative sample, and we've steadily seen the amount of data that we're handling growing exponentially. So Unitrends can help here. First in, first out is kind of your traditional or kind of that older school of thought that, hey, we're going to keep everything and then the oldest data will start to get purged out. We've enabled, you can certainly leverage first in, first out, but we've also enabled GFS retention, or grandfather, father, son retention. It's what we're using in our cloud infrastructure, but you can use it within your appliance as well. You can come in, under the Protected Assets tab, you can come in and set specific retention policies. So the policy description and the policy name will be set in. You can set this as a default, and then you have the ability to keep all of the backups from a certain number of days, and then the most recent successful backup from each of the last weeks, months, and years as specified. So you can save key recovery points without necessarily having to save all of that data. You could certainly say, hey, we need 30 days worth of backups. There's a lot of granularity in the, in a trailing month or so. But as time goes on, being able to recover from the last successful backup in a period of weeks or months might be sufficient for us. So you can leverage these GFS retention settings, set multiple policies here. We've got a few that are established. And once you've registered in your clients, you can manage retention by coming in and editing that retention policy. You can do that for virtual machines, for example, on a per host or on a per asset or per client basis here. Per guest, I should say. So you can manage the individual guests, the entire host for your physical assets that you're protecting. You can manage retention for those as well. But that GFS retention allows us to save more key recovery points over time without having to save every backup. And when we're talking about the successful backups from each of the last weeks, months, and years, that's going to include the entire backup group back to the most recent successful full. So you'd be able to recover or initiate recovery of a full system or a full client. You're not just going to be tasked with a bunch of incrementals that you're kind of standing there and, hey, we can't really do anything with these. We don't have our full. That's certainly going to be included in the backup group that is kept. The Unitrends Cloud, which we had talked about, is another option that customers can leverage for offloading that local data. Typically, when folks are sizing into an appliance, they're looking for anywhere from about 30 to 60 days of local retention. We do have global inline deduplication and compression to achieve that data reduction on our appliance. We've seen as high as 20 to 1 in some cases. But the Unitrends Cloud, from a long-term retention standpoint, is a really attractive option. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but just as a reminder, you're licensing out capacity in 500 gigabyte increments. You're selecting a retention period, 90 days, 1 to 7 years, infinite retention. Remember that you can recover these backup copies right from your local appliance, either create the recovery object in our cloud stack and download back individual items, or import the entire backup group for full recovery of a system with no egress fees. Once that retention has been built, you will have access to the most recent the most recent 7 daily backup copies, as well as the most recent successful backup from each of the last 4 weeks, 12 months, and the subscribed number of years. We're storing these on that GFS rotation for you. We're managing that back-end storage environment. It's a straightforward, predictable cost of ownership because this protected capacity, we're interested in the footprint locally before dedupe and compression at your environment. How much are you replicating to us? Let us manage that back-end environment and some of the retention pieces here. You can also elect to enroll mission-critical machines in our disaster recovery as a service, that no-touch or that white glove failover. We have, and I'll post this link when we move into the Q&A here, a cloud cost calculator, comparing the cost of Unitrends Cloud to AWS or Microsoft Azure. There's some customizable fields here. You can adjust different settings here, estimate how many recoveries you'd need to make, a number of other characteristics where in working with folks, we see costs for public clouds getting high, especially when you're getting into that retrieval piece, the fees to recover data or restore it. And a lot of folks that are storing data in a cloud environment are going back and recovering it. 60% of cloud survey respondents in the Unitrends survey this year made at least one or more recovery from their cloud-based storage environment, the cloud storage, and 13% of those had made 5 or more recoveries per year. That's where egress in a lot of cases will start to really build up. So you can leverage that cloud cost calculator and just take a look. You can view in and adjust, the formulas here, see the logistics and kind of how we've architected and designed the calculator. You can try it out for yourself. And again, I'll post that link in the chat so that folks can capture that a little bit later on. The last sort of employee that we need to be protected from is really everyone, ourselves. You need to be able to recover, deleted files. That in a lot of cases is what we see 9 times out of 10. Hey, a user accidentally deleted something. We need to come back in and put it back. At Unitrends here, from your Recover tab, and we're back into our backup catalog, you can easily recover. Here we have a file level backup. You can certainly recover the files from here. We have some snapshots of our virtual machines. You can also recover individual files from here. It's going to create a share on the appliance. From there, you'll browse in and just drag and drop here the files that you want to restore. Now, we also have a search file function. If you don't want to be burdened with browsing through the directory tree or the directory structure, you can simply select an asset, search by file name, by extension type. Wildcards are supported here. You can match the case here. Search for the original date, created date of the file. Search by file size. So we've got some criteria here. We'll just run a quick search, see if anything meets our criteria. And once we've recovered, or once we'll see here all the files that meet our criteria. We'll give this just a moment to perform its search. We can see that here's our original file create date, the backup ID, and the last date in which a backup was taken for these particular files that matched our criteria. We select the files that we need to recover. Select the files that we need to recover, and determine where we want to restore them to. The same asset here, another asset that's been registered to our system. You can choose where to place them within the directory structure, run any exclusions, custom commands here. Fairly straightforward. We want to make that easy for you so you can come in and recover those files. Again, when we talk about kind of an intuitive user UI, I don't know that it gets much easier than a search file. Any IT member set within their scope, keeping in mind that role-based access control, should be able to come in and recover files. We mentioned user interface, clean, HTML-based, easy to use. That's our goal here. We don't want you burdened down with flashing lights, a lot of bells and whistles. We just want it to work, get the most important information for you, pertinent here front and center, functionality just within those 6 key tabs, depending on what you're looking to perform within the appliance. That's about recovery assurance. So with Unitrends, with about 5 minutes left, I want to post some links for everyone in the chat, address any Q&A, but I really wanted to thank everyone for joining us here and hopefully gave you some things to be thinking about for your own environment or your own strategies. With Unitrends, you do have a single vendor for your backup hardware, software locally, your offsite recovery, long-term data retention through the Unitrends cloud, even that disaster recovery as a service. There's a lot of automation that's been built into the platform. You rack, connect, and go. You can schedule out SLA policies to streamline the operational scheduling of large number of assets. Automate recovery assurance, that application level testing. Everything that we're doing, both locally and in the cloud, is being certified and backed by recovery assurance. We talked about the security of the platform, the hardened Linux kernel, threat detection algorithms, and again, our support organization based right here in the U.S., co-load with our R&D folks. So we release a new patch. Engineer was kind of going through the module. He gets a call on it, hasn't completed it. Hey, he's got a break fix he hasn't seen before. He's got the ability to hop across the hall to the individuals that wrote the code. It's really led in a lot of cases to that unified and that overall higher satisfaction for our community and our users. So before I open things up to the Q&A, I would just like to open up and offer a poll to the audience. If there's additional information or anything that we can follow up with you regarding, please feel free to submit that here. Apologies for this gray box on the screen, but I'll leave this open for as long as I can. Please do feel free to submit any questions here. We'll be happy to follow up and provide you with a number of data sheets. We've got full feature trials that are available. If you'd like to see more of the interface and kind of talk through what it would look like in your environment, we'd be more than happy to set up a personalized private demonstration of the full UI, go in and talk about your environment. If you'd just like to chat with one of our continuity experts, get in touch, say, hey, these are some of the challenges, we're not sure, what would you guys recommend? Feel free to let us know. You can contact us as well. So while that's going, I'm just going to pull my screen down here for a moment and grab a couple of those links. So hang tight there, folks, and feel free to submit in for that poll here. But I'm going to be posting a couple of takeaways here for the audience. The first is going to be that cloud cost calculator so that you've got access and visibility into this tool here. Let me come into the chat. And Norman, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. Really appreciate that. And let me come in as well. And the second piece that I'm going to be posting here is that hidden risks checklist. This was really the focus of one of our prior webinars in our Reasons Recovery Fail series here. But if you're just joining into this session or you hadn't seen that before, check that out. Some of it may seem fairly obvious, but in so many cases, you know, where folks are struggling with recoveries, it's not necessarily that the backups weren't created successfully or we don't have good backups, but there are so many little things that can go on with the overall, you know, tuning and management of the system, making sure that we've got the right processes in place to gracefully restore. Check that out. I think it's a great little read, very, very quick there, not overly wordy or lengthy. So as I open things up for the Q&A, you know what, I'm just going to put these in the chat as well. Or you know what, I actually already did, because that is our hidden risks checklist. You can request a demo through the survey and contact here. So I guess that this is a little bit redundant here, but definitely would recommend you check out unitrends.com. Great place for all of this information. And I'm going to open things up for the Q&A here. All right. So Adam is wondering, is Unitrends able to work within a given budget for an organization to provide the quote-unquote base aspects of protection with whatever additional features would make sense given budget? We absolutely, Adam, will work through with an organization to best understand what's the right balance of feature, function, and cost for an organization. One of the really, I think, exciting things about Unitrends is that there's flexibility in how we can deploy. So you can leverage a capacity-based physical appliance, or you can leverage existing compute and storage for your environment. When it comes to our software, we've got a few different editions. Let me pull these up here. Unitrends.com/editions. And based on the functionality that's required, you can leverage different versions of our software. At unitrends.com/editions, you can find all of that functionality. When you talk about kind of base levels of protection, that, hey, we need to be able to protect our virtual environment, you know, you can do that even with just a standard level license. Hey, we want 24/7 support. You can do that with a standard level license as well. Even ransomware detection, you know, it's built into every version of our appliance. When we start getting down into Enterprise or Enterprise Plus, that's where you start getting into some of the compliance reporting, granular exchange recovery, but there are certain add-ons and other ways in which we can license and configure. I know, and I'm not a sales representative myself, but I know that our sales organization is always willing to make sure that their pencils are sharp. We hate to lose an opportunity or be disqualified because folks think, hey, we can't afford Unitrends. Always work with our team, and it never hurts to ask. Ultimately, I think that our goal is always to find the right balance of feature, function, and cost for the organizations that we're working with. There's a question from Larry, and Larry, yes, we will make sure that everyone has a recording of today's session, so that will be made available to all of our attendees. So we have another question from Elgin. What considerations do you have considering integration of Veeam and Windows File Restore? Most companies have parts piece and replacing parts or pieces there. So we would not integrate probably with Veeam, but it's not uncommon, Elgin, that folks, as they're starting or they're under support with one provider, will still leverage that provider for certain systems or certain functions and leverage Unitrends for other aspects of the environment. We worked with a customer, a community college down in Pennsylvania, that wasn't able to upgrade as frequently as they would like. They were looking at one of our competitors and really liked what they could do for a lot of their newer systems, but a lot of their key workloads were still running on Windows Server 2008, and this competitor, being a little bit newer to the space, didn't have compatibility for Windows 2008. So they looked at some Unitrends virtual appliances, leveraging existing infrastructure so that they could still protect those assets. So, in a lot of cases, we're not necessarily going to integrate with other backup products or solutions, but that's not to say that folks can't use them in concert with our solution, or use Unitrends for certain aspects of the environment and use other pieces for others. I think that, the concern that you had mentioned, where, a lot of folks have parts or pieces of things replacing, or a full rip and replace, that full forklift upgrade, is a lot to ask. Absolutely, I would agree. And that's where we can work with folks to kind of slowly work Unitrends into the environment if that's the direction that they want to go, or just use Unitrends for a portion of it. Maybe you're running Zen Hypervisor and your existing product doesn't support the Zen environment, or you're looking into deploying Nutanix and starting to deliver or migrate over to AHV as a new hypervisor. We've got full integration and access with Nutanix AHV as well. So I think that, in a lot of cases, we would work in concert with some folks here. Question with Nathan. Question from Nathan here as well. How well does Unitrends work for an integrated IT/OT environment? I'm not sure, Nathan, if you mean IoT, like Internet of Things, but if you'd like to chat in, I'd be happy to kind of do a little bit more digging on that one. I'm not sure that I understand the question as presented here, but I'll give you a moment here to chat. Just going to pull my screen down here, and I thank everyone for completing or submitting their poll response. We'll make sure that we follow up with folks later on here. But again, a copy of the presentation will be made to all of our attendees. Really, really appreciate everyone coming out here. At this time, we've gone a little bit over the allotment here, so I'm going to kind of shut things down, but I'll be hanging out, just kind of cleaning up here, so feel free to chat in any last-minute thoughts that you have. I'm happy to capture those and follow up with folks offline. Really appreciate everyone, again, joining us here today. We hope to see you for the fourth webinar in our series coming up in early November. So keep an eye on unitrends.com/events for that session coming up. We will also be raffling off the gift cards, and today I will be sharing our attendee list, and our marketing team will be reaching out to our 5 lucky winners with instructions on how to redeem your prize. So good luck to all. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.